Let's go, Bennings. I gotta get some sleep.
Hello everyone, and welcome to my complete strategy guide for fighting Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva. As usual, the guide is broken into 3 parts: my best tips, an analysis of the monster's moveset, and finally weapon matchups with counter builds. Enjoy! Let's begin tip number 1 with the canteen. So at the canteen, check your daily skills for feline insurance. If you have it, go ahead and use a voucher to make sure that you get feline insurance. The other thing to keep your eyes open for is feline fur coating. So in the fight against Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva, there's this thing you're going to look out for called the hot floor. It's kind of like standing on lava. It's going to deal tick damage, and it's going to fire blight you as well. Well, one of the things we'll talk about is using heat guard to negate it, bringing your fire resistance over 20 to kind of negate it, and lastly, we have this thing, eating for feline for coating, the daily skill. And remember, daily skills update every time you come back from, like a quest or whatever it is you're doing. So you just kind of have to check each time. Those are the daily skills. Let's talk about skills you have a little more control over. You have the feline Moxie, right? Moxie and Guts are the same skill. You have a life threshold. If a monster deals high damage and breaks that threshold, you survive the attack with 1 HP. That's what feline Moxie does. It's very valuable for this fight because Xenojiiva has a lot of attacks that do that. So feline Moxie is valuable. The other thing, if you're looking to raise your defense, the other thing I would do is eat for Elemental Resist Large. Xenojiiva deals a lot of dragon damage, and if you don't have Heat Guard on your build, you're going to be dealing with Fire Blight from that hot floor. So Elemental Resist Large can bring up your fire resistance. It can also bring up your dragon resistance, which helps you deal with Dragon Blight, and it helps you survive those energy attacks and the eruption attacks coming from Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva. Tip number 2, item loadout. Bring Nullberries to remove Dragon Blight. You can also bring Life Powder for teammates. You can bring Poison Smoke Bombs for getting a single proc of poison on Xenojiiva. He takes a fair amount of poison damage when you poison him. And finally, definitely do not forget to bring a Farcaster. Farcaster, which is the item that you consume to go back to camp, you can use this as a way to dodge one of Xenojiiva's most dangerous attacks, his wide sweeping beam. You can even use it for the ring attack as well if you want to. Tip number 3 is going to be all about hit zones. Let me start by saying don't bring poison weapons. You can use poison bombs or you can use poison ammo, but poison weapons are terrible as a rule. I don't think there's any exceptions to this. Somebody's going to say, oh, but what about that one gun lance from the Pink Raytheon? And I'm going to tell you, it's a normal shelling gun lance. I don't recommend it. I also wouldn't worry about using paralysis weapons. Your team needs you to do a lot of damage, not a lot of paralysis. So when we move on to talking about the hit zones on Xenojiiva, they flip depending on whether he's in critical state or not. Critical state is when he's glowing red. Eventually he goes into a cooldown, so I call the other state cooldown. We have critical state and cooldown. Note that breaking body parts on Xenojiiva is going to increase the damage he takes by making his hit zones more favorable. That doesn't mean you should be bringing Part Breaker, it just means if he has a broken hand, go ahead and attack his broken hand. For players who want to use elemental damage types, focus on Thunder, Water, and Ice. These 3 share the same favorable hit zones for when he's in critical state, and then Fire and Dragon damage deal better damage when he's on cooldown state, okay? Now, I've done the math, and it turns out that the Thunder, Water, and Ice have better average hit zones compared to Fire and Dragon. So I do recommend those. Be careful though, because the way it works is you also have to be considering raw damage. It turns out a lot of the Devil Joe weapons are pretty close to the meta if they aren't the meta for your class. So even though it's a dragon damage weapon, what's making the Devil Joe weapons good is their high raw damage. So you really have to know what's best for your case, raw damage or elemental damage. You kind of have to understand the difference and not discriminate just because Devil Joe weapons do have dragon damage. You can have fire weapons, you can have dragon weapons. It's about the total damage that they're going to be dealing. For raw damage hit zones, you have Sever, Blunt, and Shot, right? Sever is the sword, Blunt is the hammer, Shot is the bowgun. All 3 damage types should be aiming for his head, his forelegs, and his tail. That's easy. It's because they glow. It's worth noting that the head and the tail are better to be shooting or hitting or whatever because it has a better hit zone, but you kind of have to chase those body parts and they stand off the floor, so you might not reach them. Also, during critical state, it's important to note that hammers get especially good hit zone values on Xenojiiva's head and arms, whereas sever damage does well against the wings and the chest, which probably explains why insect glaive aerials are doing so well. Shot damage has fewer favorable hit zones in general across the Xenojiiva's body. It gets its best hit zones on Xenojiiva's chest during critical state, which is not true when he's on cooldown, okay? So it flips really hard between cooldown state and critical state. On cooldown, I recommend going for the head, tail, and forearms, but in critical state with shot damage, you gotta go for the chest. For all weapons, you'll want to avoid his hind legs, tail base, right, and neck. The hind legs take the least damage of all his body parts. Tip number 4, dealing with the hot floor. Xenojiiva's attacks will cause the floor to turn orange. When you walk on it, you'll take constant tick damage and become fire blighted, which means double tick damage. This runs your health down very quickly. There's a few key ways to deal with it. The Kulve Gamma legs come with Heat Guard built in, and the Heat Guard skill will completely negate the hot floor. It's the best strategy. After that, your next best option. Some people choose to bring the Clear Mind Charm, which is going to completely negate it as well, but at the cost of build efficiency. I don't think that the Clear Mind Charm is that good of a choice just because, I mean, you're giving up that charm slot for one skill that only deals with the hot floor, so you're giving up a lot. Finally, the method I will use if I don't have the Kulve Gamma legs is to just bring my fire resistance over 20, typically by eating at the canteen for elemental resist large, and then also have a health regen augmentation on your weapon and kind of avoid walking on the floor if you can. So don't walk on the hot floor. When you do, make sure you're attacking, and the health regen augmentation is going to get your health, you're going to heal yourself. You're going to get your life back. Also, remember, I mentioned the daily food skill, Feline Fur Coating. This also negates hot floor. We'll just mention that again. Tip number 5, for gear, you're going to want mantles. Your best mantles are Rocksteady Mantle. This is going to allow you to completely negate Xenojiiva's undodgeable roars, Xenojiiva's tremors, and his wind pressure. The other recommended mantle is obviously the Temporal Mantle. I try to save the Temporal Mantle for critical state so that I can really get close to him and deal a lot of damage to try and cause a knockdown in the critical state. Getting a knockdown in critical state is a big deal because when it occurs, you and your teammate are going to get your best damage at that point. Tip number 6, if you're using a melee weapon, be sure to pick up and use the Slinger Pods on Xenojiiva while he's flying, since you can actually knock him out of the air after firing enough of them. Slinger Bombs are nice. You can also get good damage with the Pierce Pods, I mean really good damage with the Pierce Pods, if you aim them into his chest during critical state. Tip number 7, Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva is going to cause a lot of tremors throughout the fight, and some of these can actually be true comboed into his other faster attacks, which means they're dangerous, not just annoying. If you take 2 levels of tremor resistance, you can pretty much negate this issue, and there's an extremely efficient piece of armor for tremor resistance. It's called the Zora Gamma Chest Piece. Tip number 8. Like all Arch-Tempered fights, you're going to have an easier time if you play solo with the Fortitude skill, or if you have decent teammates. If you're looking for decent teammates that you can trust to communicate better, and in general ones that are more informed, consider joining my Discord server and using the LFG channels in that server to find other players. Alright, that covers the most important general tips for fighting Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva. Next, we'll take a look at the moveset, so you can dodge and you can punish his attacks. Really knowing a monster's moveset is what allows you to play like an expert. Now, Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva has a robust moveset, so what we're going to do, we're going to break them down into easy to understand categories. We have physical attacks, energy beams, eruptions, and aerial attacks, which they're going to be their own special group. Let's start with the physical attacks. Physical attack 1. Xenojiiva is going to have a crazy alien roar. It lasts for a while, so you're not actually able to dodge this roar. It's annoying. Earplugs 5 will negate it, although I don't really feel like you can justify Earplugs 5 except for on a Gunlance. Rocksteady Mantle obviously will negate it. You can guard it. Foresight Slash on the Longsword will, you can Foresight Slash it, or if you're using Insect Glaive, you can actually jump into the air to have a faster recovery speed, because the recovery speed from being knocked out of the air is better than the recovery speed from being roared at. Physical attack number 2, Claw Swipe. This is a basic melee attack coming from one of the forearms. It actually deals a fair chunk of damage and it knocks you back. It has good range and pretty fast startup. It doesn't really have a long windup. So this is hard to react to and it's surprisingly dangerous. This is one of the attacks that still gets me even though I've fought Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva many times. Arm Slam. This is going to be a mixed physical and eruption attack, where Xenojiiva takes his arm, slams it down, and then in front of that arm, a large eruption will occur. It's really not that hard to avoid because you can see it coming, and the eruption occurs so much later that you're already out of the way. Just avoid that arm and go for the other arm. Tail swipe. Xenojiiva swipes his tail in a huge arc to his left or right. This can cause eruptions in the ground near the tip of the tail as it's passing by. If you see him winding up his tail for this attack, try running under his chest to avoid it. It has a long wind up, so you can usually see it coming. One of the things with his tail attacks, there's two of them mainly, one of the things about it is he only really uses them when you're attacking his tail, so you know if you're attacking his tail, you're going to have to deal with this. Attack number 5, physical attack, Tail Smash. Another tail attack that you can easily avoid. This time Xenojiiva is going to simply lift his tail straight up in the air and bring it straight back down in a line with a few eruptions forming near the tip of the tail. This is always easy to outspace because you know it's going to have a straight hit zone. Just get away from it, right? Just get away from it. Physical attack number 6 is not so easy. This is actually a really important move called Body Slam. Body Slam is shared by a lot of the monsters in the game. So Body Slam on Xenojiiva is a big deal. Just like it is on the Behemoth, is pretty slow, but it has so much range and so many active hitboxes, you don't really have a good chance of dodging it with the iframes of your dodge. Your best move is to actually outspace it really effectively. And you can do this a variety of ways, but the way that I think is best is to actually kind of go for the area between his hind leg and his forearm, okay? So if you try to go near his head and forearm, his head's really long and his forearms are really wide. So there's a good chance those will still, grab you on the way down. But if you go toward his hind legs and to the left or the right, he's got a thin waist, and his legs, I don't know if they're part of the attack, but it's usually pretty easy to avoid the legs because they don't move too much. Yeah, so just go toward his thin waist area, and there won't be the same active hitboxes there. If you try to run directly away from it, his head could pick you off as well. Now, the main reason that this move is so dangerous isn't just because it deals a lot of damage, but also because once he's hit you with it, you get knocked down. And that's that situation where you have to wiggle your joystick to try and stand back up sooner, so you have to recover. And while you're down like that, he can actually combo you. So this is a bad situation to be in. If you do get knocked down like that, one thing you can do is if you happen to have bomb pods in your slinger, you can fire a bomb pod to interrupt him from using his next attack. But flash pods do not work on him, so the best scenario is to just not be in this situation. Another thing is if you're not going to outspace the move, sheath your weapon, turn your back to the monster, and use a dive evade. Everyone should know how to dive evade by now. Physical attack number 7, the Wing Smash. This is the same move Nergigante uses, but instead of wind pressure, you get tremors, followed by eruptions that lead out on the outside of the wings, right? This move lands on me all the time because it's hard to see what he's doing with his wings. In fact, this and the Claw Swipe might be the moves that land on me the most consistently. To avoid the Wing Smash, stay near the inside of his forelegs so that you're on the safe side of the wings. If you're on the outside of the wings, you're going to get hit by the eruptions. If you're on the inside of the wings, you're not going to get hit by the eruptions, but you're probably still going to get tremored, okay? And finally, the last physical attack we're going to take a look at is the dash attack. Xenojiiva picks a player and runs toward him. When he's running toward that player, you'll want to try and keep up with him so you can punish like his tail. If you're really ahead of him, you can still punish the arms. Now, the trick with this move is that if you touch his head or any of his legs, you get trampled. You can be under the legs. It's just tricky to not get nicked by his head or nicked by any of his moving legs. So the best place to be for this attack is on the outside of his body. And again, you'll want to chase him so that you can punish him at the end of the move. And that wraps up the physical attacks. Let's talk about beam projectiles. These deal dragon damage, and along with the eruptions, it's typically these that get you killed. So starting out with energy attack number 1, you've heard of fireballs, but Xenojiiva doesn't really breathe fire. So we're going to have this thing called Energyballs. Don't laugh. So we're going to have energy ball attacks, and I have a whole group of them to talk about. We're going to just group them all together under one banner. Xenojiiva has a whole bunch of different ways he uses his energy balls. It's just a shot of energy that comes out like a brief beam. Here's what I've seen him do. Now, this is one of the easiest ones to avoid. He might carefully aim one shot after taking a step back and having a bit of a wind-up. This is also fairly punishable if he's not aiming it at you. He's aiming it at like your cat or at like one of your teammates, right? But here's a move that's really hard to dodge. So Xenojiiva will use this energy ball where he rapidly fires one shot while taking a step backwards. He does it at the same time, and he aims this shot at you, okay? So it's like he steps and shoots at the same time. This one catches me all the time. Just like the claw swipe, the wing swipe, this shot of Energy Ball is just going to hit you in the face, right? And it's going to suck, all right? Other than that, he also has a move where he can blind fire 3 shots rapidly to the left and right. I don't really consider this attack too dangerous. One trick I use is if you're in front of him, I just run straight toward his head. You can get under his head. It's not, this one rarely lands. He has to basically get lucky, and you just have to happen to be in the crossfire of this move for it to land. He has another version of this move where he actually does aim it, but if you get far enough behind his head, he can't land it on you anymore. So you have to be careful, because this other version of it, he's aiming it at you, and if you're attacking his forelegs, it's possible for him to actually land the attack on you if you're attacking the foreleg, but if you get kind of behind the foreleg and keep attacking it, it's going to miss you. And finally, he can walk forward and keep shooting energy balls at the same time. He tends to, this is kind of like a form of chasing for him. Try to run straight toward him and get under his head, and he'll have to stop because he's not going to be able to hit you anymore. Okay, so those were the energy balls. Now we have another group we're going to talk about called energy beams. Energy beams are sustained attacks. They typically don't hit you, but when they do hit you, it's going to end in a cart. It's very likely going to end in a cart unless you had good dragon resistance and you had vitality 3 and your health was full, right? You have to have all those conditions to survive these. If you skipped health boost on your build, or you have really bad dragon resistance, or both, good luck to you, you're probably dead. So starting us out, we have a move I'm calling the direct fire beam. This is when Xenojiiva takes a fire back. He aims at one player and fires a sustained beam in one direction. This is very easy to avoid because it stays in place, okay? So you just kind of see him charging it up. It's a very punishable attack, especially if you're close to him. You smack him in the legs. You can smack him in the head. Just be careful not to be swept up in the beam. It's possible that your attack has a forward motion value, right, or a movement value. It brings you closer toward your target. You get hit by the hitbox. It's really annoying. So just be careful about that. There is a situation where this move is really dangerous. I'll explain. Let's say that Xenojiiva just hit you. You're kind of like flying in the air, you're landing on the ground, and it's time for you to stand back up. Well, if his next move is to aim at you and fire that beam, you could be stuck under the beam waiting to stand back up. Your character will eventually run out of time and have to stand up, and then you're going to get hit by the beam, and I guarantee you that is going to be a cart. So if you see him moving into position for using that attack, you better stand up as fast as you can and get away from it. All right? That's the direct fire beam. Then we have the sweeping beam. So this is a team killing move. When he first came out, this got people all the time. It's very similar to the Valhazak beam. He'll do a wind up with this neck, and he's going to fire, from side to side, covering the whole arena with this beam. And it will probably one-shot you unless you have those conditions. Again, high dragon resistance, vitality, and your health is full, right? So with this move, the best response to it is to get behind his head and punish him for using it. Also note, he can easily push you up into the beam if you try to attack his head, so I always say go for the arms, it's safer. Now if you can't make it behind his head and you know it, you're going to have to dodge the beam to get away from it. The easiest way to dodge is to simply guard it. In order to guard the beam, you've got to have the guard up attack, or the guard up skill. Okay, so if you have the guard up skill, just block it. If you have the insect glaive, jump over it. Everything else, you're going to need to sheath your weapon, turn your back to the monster, okay, turn your back to Xenojiiva, not the beam, but to Xenojiiva himself. And then when the beam's getting real close, press that roll button once. It's going to turn into a dive evade and it'll pass right over you. Let's say you're not very confident in your dive evasion skills and the team only has 1 life left. Sheath your weapon and use a Farcaster. Now in a very rare scenario, if you're really in trouble, you could also stand behind a rock. Sometimes there's rocks on the stage, and these will actually block the beam for 1 pass. I don't recommend this. This is much trickier than just simply using a dive evade or using a Farcaster. Also, if you did use that Farcaster, be sure you climb into the tent and pick up a fresh Farcaster so that you can do it again. Because if you leave right away, you're not going to be able to return to the tent anymore because you're missing that Farcaster, okay? So Farcasters are important. The third beam attack I'm calling his standing beam. This is where Xenojiiva is going to stand on his hind legs and fire a moving beam down at the floor. The beam is actually fairly easy to avoid. But take your time with getting behind it, because if it actually does touch you, it's going to deal a ton of damage. Also, remember, the hind legs take the least damage from any weapon. They just have terrible hit zones, so go for the tail, don't go for the legs. If you can hit the claws, that's great. Bowguns are going to be able to hit the claws. The bow's going to be able to hit the claws. Insect Glaive could technically jump up and attack them, though I think that the tail is still a better option. But sometimes the tail is hanging off the side of the ledge, so you definitely can't attack it, and you just got to take what's best for you. You know, you got to pick whatever's best. An alternative option is to use smoke bombs at this point, poison smoke bombs, to get 1 proc of poison. Don't go for 2 procs of poison, it'll take too long. But 1 proc of poison, you could sharpen your weapon, you could eat, whatever it is you want to do. The move lasts a long time, it's extremely punishable, so take advantage of it. And finally, the last beam attack in this category, I'm calling it the last stand beam. So this is where Xenojiiva once again gets up on his hind legs and he shoots a beam down at the floor, but this time it's going to move a little, it's going to have wider range, it's going to be a little less predictable. It has a set pattern, but it's just kind of like, if you're not real familiar with the pattern, you might not be sure how to get past the beam. Take your time, get behind it, and start punishing the heck out of him. It lasts longer, the move does, and then at the end of the move, he falls into the ground, he like collapses, so you get tons of time to attack him. He only uses this attack when he's about to die. So this is the developers throwing you a bone saying, it's almost over, you might as well finish him off. If you don't kill him while he's in this move, that's okay, but play it safe because you are just about to win, and if you get overly excited and make a mistake, he can still wipe you out before the fight is over. We are done with the beams and we're ready to talk about the eruption attacks. I consider the eruption attacks to be just as dangerous as the beam attacks, especially because, you know, you'll see them on the floor because the floor will look like it's breaking. And what makes them tricky is there's a bit of a delay before they pop out of the floor. So it's like you get a wind up that is coming, but it's like you're not really sure when do I roll away from this. So eruption attack number 1, powering up. Xenojiiva goes from cooldown state to critical state in a large burst of wind pressure that if you're close enough to him, is going to knock you backwards. And if you're close to him, you're safe from the eruptions. If you're further away, you won't be hit by the wind pressure, but you're going to probably be surrounded by eruptions. The worst case scenario is when you're on the edge. You're going to be in the range of the wind pressure and in the range of the eruptions. You don't want that. If you are in that situation, at the end of the animation where you're stunned, you better be tapping that roll button to get away from whichever eruption is closest to you so it doesn't hit you. The next eruption attack, I'm calling it triple eruption. This move only gets used in the critical state. So he'll be glowing red and he has a new move called triple eruption when he's glowing red. It's exactly what it sounds like. There's going to be 3 eruptions for you to avoid. The first eruption is a line that comes out from under his chest to in front of his head. The other 2 lines are going to come from his forelegs. These are going to have a bit of an angle to them. If you had a bird's eye view, it would look kind of like a V with the line coming out in the middle, right? But they come out one after the other. So the head line comes out first, and then the foreleg lines come out next. This is basically a move to punish players who you're impatient and you kept attacking rather than getting away from him. You'll know he's using this attack, there's plenty of wind up, you'll see the ground underneath him breaking, you gotta get the hell away from his arms and his forehead. Go for the hind legs, I would say, because this keeps you close to his chest, and when the eruptions are gone, you can go right back to his chest or arms, or whatever it is you were attacking. After the triple eruption, of course, we have the eruption rings. This is a move, he's going to use this many times throughout the fight. It was a brand new move that they brought into the game when they released Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva. Everyone thought it was a lot of fun. So the way it works is he'll get on his hind legs to use what looks like a body slam, but it's not. You'll notice one arm is held higher than the other. That's the tell. He comes slamming down and he pushes his arms into the ground. When he comes slamming down, there'll be tremors, but it's okay. You should be able to get out of that pretty fast. And then when the rings start coming out, you'll have a small tight ring around his body. It's a blue ring, and it's going to blow up and deal high damage. And then a wave of rings, one larger than the other, is going to come out in a big wave, right? They each blow up one after another. So if you get close to the ring in front of you, wait for it to blow up, you should be able to run forward or roll forward, and then the ring behind you blows up and misses you, and you stay near the target. That's the whole trick to his ring attack. Ancient Lesson has a move just like this. Speaking of which, if you want to see my Ancient Lesson complete guide, I'll leave a link to it in the description and the comments section, because it's going to be just like this Xenojiiva guide, highly detailed breakdown of the moveset, the build, tips, all of it, the whole shebang. So I'll leave that there. If you haven't seen it, go take a look at it. Getting back to the concentric ring attack on Xenojiiva, If you're using a shield, I learned you don't need the guard up skill to block this move. So if you got like sword and shield, feel free to just block it. And if you want the attack to push you into him, the trick is to face away from Xenojiiva and guard. The ring attack, when it hits your shield, will push you into Xenojiiva, so that once you're out of the stun, the guard stun, you just turn around and attack him. Alright, and that's going to be it for the Eruption attacks. Finally, we have a group of moves that I'm categorizing as aerial attacks. Aerial attacks will include physical moves, beams, and eruptions, but I feel like it's easy to categorize them as aerial attacks because he uses them all together, so it's good to think of them as kind of like a package. Aerial attack number 1. In his cooldown state, Xenojiiva might occasionally decide to go airborne by simply jumping straight into the air. This is actually kind of nice when he does this because he has a Liftoff Attack. I hate the Liftoff Attack. But yeah, so you just want to recognize that he's going airborne. At this point, you can do whatever it is you're going to do. You can sharpen your weapon, you can eat, or you can look around for a Slinger Pod and shoot him with the Slinger Pod. Remember, if enough people do this, he'll be knocked out of the air, and you'll get an opportunity to do a few hits, land a few attacks on him without him fighting back. Aerial attack number 2. This is what I was just talking about. In his critical state and sometimes in his cooldown state, Xenojiiva never jumps straight up in the air. He always uses a liftoff attack. This attack has a circular motion that involves both the beam and Xenojiiva's tail. So there's like 2 moving parts to it. It goes around in a big ring. If you don't want to be hit by it, you could stand directly in the center of this move. You'll be hit by wind pressure if this happens, and you'll be stuck between a hot floor, right? If you really want to be safe to it, kind of be on the outside of the ring, sheath your weapon, and just use a dive evade. That's what I do most of the time. You can also just guard it if you have a shield, so you could guard it. I hate it when he uses liftoff because it very often hits me if I don't dodge, if I don't use that dive evade. And when he's going airborne, you have to give up on dealing damage to him. You're just not going to keep attacking. There's an exception, bow guns with like elemental ammo and pierce ammo are the exception. Now, aerial attack number 3, once airborne, Xenojiiva is going to use a couple different attacks. The first is simply an energy ball aimed at a player. You basically would have to be sitting still for this to actually land. If you took my advice and you decided to sharpen your weapon when you went airborne, this is not impossible to imagine. Because when you're sharpening your weapon, you're just standing still. Just keep your eyes on him while you're sharpening and roll if you have to roll. Next, there's a beam where Xenojiiva fires in a direct line forward. So he starts kind of at his feet, and it's just a moving beam and it goes in a straight line. Very, very easy to dodge. Just stay out of the way of it. Finally, his most common attack in the air is his aerial claw swipe that gets followed up by an eruption line. Although I rarely seem to be hit by this move, it's still very annoying and he tends to chase you down with it, so you kind of have to be on the move to avoid it. Alright, and then number 6, Xenojiiva's last aerial attack and the last move in his moveset that we'll cover is the landing attack. You'll notice that he's going to land because he'll kind of pause midair and he'll fly slightly higher by a smidge. Then he's going to turn around and come straight down and just land right on the ground. Now, if you got hit by any of his body parts, this is going to count as an attack that damaged you and knocks you back. If you didn't get hit by any of his parts, you're going to get tremored if you're near him. So if you have tremor 3, right, tremor is just 3, you can just start attacking him right away. Otherwise, you're probably going to want to guard, maybe be a little further away from him, whatever trick you're going to have. I mean, if you have tremor 2, you'll be tremored as well, but you'll recover from that pretty fast. So you can just stand near him. You don't want to be hit by his actual body parts. And that's it. We're done breaking down his moveset. Anyone who watched this far is already going to have a much easier time fighting Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva. But wait, there's more. Now we're going to talk about the builds that I consider to be the best matchup against Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva, and I'm going to be showing you builds, I'm going to be giving you advice on those builds, and explaining to you why they work so well. Starting us out, the build that I think is the easiest for fighting Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva definitely has to be the Blaze Light Bowgun. If you want to see a full build counter guide for this weapon, I do have a video for it already. I'll leave a link to that in the comment section as well. The reason this is working so well is because it has elemental ammo types that can be fired kind of from a safer range. Stay off the hot floor, stay out of the range of his attacks, and just shoot him from a distance. And you're having 2 types of elemental ammo type that are working together. It has fire ammo, which is useful when Xenojiiva is in his cooldown state, and you have ice ammo, which is effective in his critical state. But here's where you kind of have these extras that really come into play as well. It has poison ammo, and poison ammo is effective on Xenojiiva, so just keep him poisoned for your team. You also have paralysis ammo. You can paralyze him for your team as well. Finally, the gun has the gut skill built into it. Remember at the beginning of the video when I told you to consider eating feline moxie? Guts and moxie are the same thing. So it comes with guts. It's terrific for surviving one big attack. You're getting terrific damage out with that ice ammo when he's in his critical state and causing knockdowns for your team and just really pumping out the damage. Now, if you don't have the Lunastra Blaze Light Bowgun, you don't feel like farming the parts you need to build it, you could alternatively use the Empress Styx Light Bowgun. It comes with thunder and water ammo. They're going to do the same damage, so just build for one or the other, doesn't matter. You don't have all the same utility of the Blaze Light Bowgun, but when Xenojiiva is in his critical state, you're still going to be doing terrific damage with that Light Bowgun. And the advantage for the Styx is that it has built-in spare shot. So if you want spare shot on the build and you don't want to use like Xenojiiva Alpha or Xenojiiva Beta armor pieces, just use the Styx Light Bowgun. It will probably take you a little longer to fight them, but you know, maybe the build is more accessible, and maybe you own this bowgun because you fight Arch-Tempered Kulve Taroth. She's a big, important part of the game. So we've talked about how I think the elemental ammo types on these light bowguns are going to be your easiest bet for taking down Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva. Now let's talk a little bit about heavy bowguns. You have two options, Pierce Ammo 3 or Spread Ammo 3. People don't talk about the Spread Ammo as much. It's actually very effective. You can shoot Xenojiiva in the head. He has a decent hit zone value when he's in the cooldown state. When you're using the Pierce Ammo 3 in the cooldown state on Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva, really doesn't do that good of damage. It's not until he hits critical state that it does good damage. But guess what? The Spread Ammo is effective during both the cooldown state and during the critical state. The big difference is that the Pierce Ammo is a bit safer. You can shoot it from range. The Spread Ammo, even though it's doing more damage, you kind of have to be closer to him, similar to what a melee weapon might have to do. But even then, because you're using, you know, a ranged ammo type, you're much better at shooting him in the head than maybe like a different weapon is at stabbing him in the head. You see what I'm saying? So you can use either or. For the Spread Ammo, you're going to go with the traditional Glutton build. For the Pierce Ammo, there's a few different Kulve Taroth heavy bowguns that you could choose from. You have the Kjarr Water heavy bowgun. This is going to be the best Pierce Ammo level 3 bowgun in the game. After that, you have the Taroth Support. They're basically clones of each other, but the Taroth Support does a smidge less damage, right? They're basically clones, with the Taroth Support being slightly less powerful. Then after that, you have a craftable heavy bowgun called the Empress Styx. That's why I recommend, if you can craft it, definitely craft it. If you don't have the parts to craft it, use the Legiana heavy bowgun. This is going to be the least damaging of all your options, but if maybe you already have that one built, or maybe you have the parts to build that one. Now, here's the deal with all of the heavy bowguns, including the Glutton heavy bowgun build. If you don't have the guard up skill, you know, decoration, don't use a heavy bowgun. Go right over to the light bowguns. That's because you want to be able to guard Xenojiiva's most dangerous attack, the wide sweeping beam, with your heavy bowgun. If you can't guard it, it's going to be fairly risky. I mean, if you're really skilled, you can sheath your heavy bowgun in time and dive evade, or you can try to roll toward the head, try to get behind it, but it's a big risk. What's making the heavy bowguns useful isn't just the Pierce Ammo, it's the fact that you can guard everything. If you can't guard everything, you're actually kind of playing a risk for your team. I've tested this myself. It's just a case that the slow sheathing time on your heavy bowgun does leave open a fair amount of risk for being hit by that wide sweeping beam. Okay, so we've talked about 3 very easy bowgun options. With the light bowguns, it was rapid fire elemental ammo types. With the heavy bowguns, it was Pierce Ammo level 3 or Spread Ammo level 3. But let's say you don't play bowguns, you mostly play with melee weapons. Some of the melee weapons have a much easier time with Xenojiiva than the others. My top 3 choices are the Lance. The Lance is able to chase, it has a dash attack, is able to guard, and is able to counter guard. It also reaches the head and tail on Xenojiiva pretty easily with the triple high thrust attack. Insect Glaive, which gets good hitboxes on Xenojiiva using aerial attacks, is able to jump over the sweeping beam, really is able to jump over most of his attacks as long as you stay high enough in the air. That's important. You got to stay high enough in the air or those eruptions are actually going to touch you and you're going to take high damage from them. But yeah, you can just jump over the monster. You can also bring a Carnage Beetle that'll deal poison damage to Xenojiiva, so you can actually poison Xenojiiva just on your own with your weapon, right? And finally, I would say Charge Blade is my 3rd choice. Charge Blade is able to guard just like the Lance is able to guard, and it has that very high damage SAED combination. You can basically use it from any position, and because Xenojiiva's body is so large, you're going to land the entire Sade, right? Whereas maybe like a smaller monster, you risk some of the Sade missing or missing entirely if you're too close, right? Not going to happen with the Xenojiiva. You're going to hit the whole thing, so you can guard all of the attacks, and you can Sade combo off of Xenojiiva all day and all night. Now, on that list was going to be Longsword, but in the end I decided Longsword is just not quite as good as the other three. Longsword was nice because you're able to use the Foresight Slash to dodge the roar, and I thought that was cool. The other nice thing about the Longsword is it has good horizontal range, good vertical range, but what I don't like is when you're using the Helm Splitter, this requires you to attack a part of Xenojiiva's body with a very narrow hitbox. It's very easy to miss this move because Xenojiiva moves his arms around a lot, and then when you're in the air coming back down, it's very possible for Xenojiiva to move or turn around entirely, and the entire Helm Splitter move is lost. Like it misses, or you hit his hind legs, which is terrible, and it happens a lot. So Longsword's okay, it's just not in the same category as the Lance, the Insect Glaive, and the Charge Blade. Those are the three weapons that I think do the best for the melee weapons. Alright, that wraps up the end of my strategy guide for fighting Arch-Tempered Xenojiiva. If you learned something new or found this guide helpful, please help me by leaving a like and a comment. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.